Hello, and welcome to Introduction to this Data Interface and Other Basics, GPH 717, Week 3, Part 1. This lecture will cover the basics of the data interfaces, the window you see when you open Stata, creating and saving do files and data files, importing data sets, merging data sets, and dropping and keeping rows of data from a data set. We'll also show you how to export data sets. We're going to start by quickly looking at some data I've created. You can see I have two Excel spreadsheets. Imagine this is from a baseline questionnaire and a follow-up questionnaire, and so I have the same people and a little bit of data about each of them. You can see there's a study ID which would allow me to link these two data sets, and we're going to use that. Now looking at Stata, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import one of those data sets I just showed you in order to look at the interface a little more clearly. So we go to File, Import, and we look at the different types of files. We can see Excel spreadsheet, which my data set was. The other option here I want to point out is the SAS export. You would use this for a file that has been saved in the program called SAS. SAS is a lot like Stata, and so many statisticians use SAS and might save files that are publicly available and would allow you to convert them to Stata using this function. So when we click on Excel, we see we can browse, and I can access the baseline questionnaire from my desktop where I've saved it. I get a preview of the data, and I see the worksheet is correct. The other thing that is important to look at is this import first row as variable names. You can see my first row of data is my variable name, so I want to check this, and that's going to move that up, and so now my first row shows up as data, and I can see the variable names. The other thing that can be useful is this variable case. I can preserve it, which means leave it how it is, or I can make it all lower or uppercase. This is useful in Stata because case really matters. So when you're typing out a command, you want to know that everything can be in lowercase or uppercase instead of having to look that closely at the variable name. So now I've imported the data. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the results window, which you've probably all used in biostatistics. If you use the drop-down menu to do an analysis, or you type it in the command box, that analysis is going to show up here. You can see the code that I could have typed instead of using the drop-down in order to import those data. You're familiar with the command box where I type something in order to tell Stata to do that. You might not be familiar with this box, the review box. This keeps track of every command I've told Stata to do, and it would allow me to do it again by clicking once. I see that it appears in my command window, and then I could click enter and I could rerun it. Now Stata is not going to do it because they don't want to overwrite the data that I already have. But if you had, let's say, a tab or something like that, you would be able to do that here. So if you were summarizing data, anything like that, you could just keep doing it over and over by using the review window. You'll notice that since that command didn't work, it shows up in red instead of black like the previous one. The variables window shows every variable in my data set, and when I click on a variable, I can learn more about it. For example, I can see that study ID is named study ID. It doesn't have a label, it's just the same as the variable name. It's an integer, so that's the type. And this is the format, which we don't need to worry about for this course, but essentially tells us how long that integer might be and sort of the format that it's in. The next thing I want to talk about is do and data files. You're probably familiar with the data editor. So this is where you would paste data if you were pasting something from Excel. And again, you can look at the data, you can see it, you can actually change the data. Let's say I delete that. Yes, I want to apply it, etc. The other window I wanted to show you is the do editor. This is really useful in Stata. The do editor allows you to essentially keep track of, excuse me while I get my window so you can see both, keep track of all the commands that you've run and rerun them. In other words, I can go in here, I can copy this code, I can paste it here. I'm going to take out the spaces and the line breaks, and now I can save this file. So I'm going to go up to File, Save As. We're going to call this Practicing And now I can import that data set over and over again. Now remember when I was looking at the data, I accidentally deleted one of the ages. Now I can't remember what it is. Instead of having to go through the drop-down again, I can go back to my Stata screen. I'm going to clear out what's already there using the command clear, so that gets rid of all of the data that were there. I'm going to go back to my do file, highlight this line of import code, hit do, and now I redid it and I didn't have to do nearly as much work. The other thing about do files that I think is useful is you can create notes. By putting an asterisk in front of anything, it's going to treat it as a note, not as a command. So I can say things like, I imported the baseline questionnaire data. This is useful for me to remember what I did, but also would allow me to share this do file with someone else who then would have a better chance of understanding what I was doing. So we saved this. The other thing we might want to do is save the data that we've pulled into Stata. So then again, if we make a mistake, we don't have to go quite as far back to start again. Now what I'm going to do is first, I'm going to tell Stata where I want everything saved. That's called a working directory. It's the directory or the file path that you want Stata to go to retrieve files or to save things for you. To do that, you're going to type cd. I'm going to use my desktop. Instead of typing, I can actually just copy from here. End quote. And now I can highlight this, hit do, Stata ran it, and now it's going to save everything on my desktop when I tell it to. So for example, I want to save the data set that I have here already. I can simply type save practice and run that code. And now you can see that data set has saved to my desktop. Simple as that. And now if I were going forward again, if I made a mistake or something like that, I could open this data set and I'd be starting from that clean data set that I haven't done anything to yet. The next thing I want to show you is how to merge data sets. You'd want to merge data sets if you have two files that are about the same people but have different information about those people that you want to use in the same analysis. So in this instance, for example, I have the baseline questionnaire and the follow-up questionnaire, and I'm trying to evaluate the program. So I need to look at the data together. Now I've already saved the baseline data, so we know that's safe. We can see the file here. I'm going to go and I'm going to import the other file. So the same thing I did before. I go to the Excel spreadsheet, I browse, I find my follow-up questionnaire, hit open, I can see it again. Again, I want my first row to be the variable names, and then I click OK. It's asking me, do I want to erase what's already in the memory? And I can say yes, because I know I've saved it outside of Stata, so it's safe. So here's my second data set. I might again take this data or this command from the results window and paste it into my do file. So then I have it. You get these weird line breaks because I don't have Stata opened as a full window. If you keep it as a full window, you won't have that problem. Okay, so now I have this data set and I have this data set over here, this practice data set that I've saved. I want to merge them together. I know that they both have the study ID. What I mean by merge is it's going to create a single file that has all the columns of data with one row for each person. And so I'll have the baseline and follow-up data in a single row for each study ID. The command for doing this is merge, and we're doing what's called a one-to-one merge, which means every time you see an ID, it only occurs one time in the baseline file and one time in the follow-up file. I'm going to tell it what variable to merge on next. So study ID space using what's the other file name. So I already have these data in Stata. Here I'm telling Stata what other data set I want to merge it with. And that's the data set I saved earlier. So I called that practice.dta. Stata knows where to look for that data set because I created my working directory. I don't have to tell it all this information about where it's located, user/Jen Mikularski, so it makes it much quicker to have created that working directory than having to tell Stata every time where I want it to go. So I can highlight that code and I can press do. And now what's happened here, if you look in your variable window, you can see I still have one column that's study ID, and that was the same in both files, but now I have all of the data from both files. In addition, I have a variable called underscore merged. Underscore merged is a way of looking at which files or which rows matched between two data sets. In this case, all of the data was in both data sets. So my merge is going to show up as matched. If there was a row in one data set that wasn't in another set, it would say unmatched. And so I'd be able to find people that were only in the baseline questionnaire or only completed the follow-up questionnaire pretty easily. You can also see the results here. You can see that there are 20 rows, 20 observations, and that all of those observations were matched. The other thing I want to show you how to do is how to drop data. Dropping data means getting rid of it essentially. So there's certain people that I've decided I'm not going to study in this particular analysis. Let's say, for example, that I don't want to include the people that don't have diabetes, and those people currently are marked as having a 0 under diabetes. The code for doing that is drop using the name of the variable, so in this case diabetes. And now I have to say, before that, if diabetes equals, Stata requires two equal signs, 0. So I'm telling Stata, drop a row of data if the variable diabetes is equal to 0. And you can watch the data set as I run this, and you will see that anybody who had a 0 is now gone. I'm down to 12 people. You can actually do the alternative too. You can keep specific people. So I could say keep if, let's say, gender equals male. You'll notice I put quotes around it this time. Anytime a variable is red, it's a character variable, I have to use quotes when I'm pointing Stata to it. I don't have to do that for a number. A number does not require quotes, but a character variable will. So I can highlight this, I can press do, and again I've kept only those that were male participants, and female participants have been dropped. You can also see within your results window how many people were dropped each time that you did that function. That's kind of useful because it's sort of a face validity check. So if you knew there was 10 people that didn't have diabetes and you saw that only 8 observations were dropped, you would know there was a problem. The last thing I want to show you is just how to export the data. It's pretty straightforward. So I've created this data set where the data are merged and I want to keep it. I can save it. You know how to do that using the word save, and I can use some other file name. But if I want to export it as a Excel spreadsheet, I go up to File, down to Export, Data to Excel Spreadsheet. I can choose variables, or if I leave it blank, it's simply going to do everything. I'm going to call this Practice Final. I'm very creative about my file names, you all can see. And you can read through these. Most of them are pretty intuitive, but the one you probably want to check is Save Variable Names in the first row in Excel file. So then you know which data you're working with. Then you're going to hit OK, and now I've exported those data again to my desktop, since that's where I'm telling Stata to keep everything. So that's some of the basics of Stata to get you started. Of course, if you have any questions, please reach out to your instructor, and then you'll have the subsequent video that will talk a little bit more about data management.